All right, welcome everybody to this episode 77 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series brought to you by Thoughttium. I am Anthony Ewing, a partner here at Thoughttium, and a very gracious host of this show that we are bringing to you every week, every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. The goal of Navigating Now is to bring a new dialogue of leadership, business, and entrepreneurship to our community. And our community is growing week over week. We continue to hear the feedback that this story that we're telling through Navigating Now is not only relevant, but it matters. And we are so excited to continue this dialogue today with just an incredible leader and more so a friend of the Thoughttium network. And I will introduce him in just a moment. We want to cover off on a couple of housekeeping items. We have a handful of folks joining us via different channels across social media, particularly our LinkedIn family. We love our growing LinkedIn community. We're very fortunate to be able to stream live each week to LinkedIn. You can find all previous episodes and future guests at thoughttium.com/live. And for those folks who are tuning in on LinkedIn, we welcome you all and we encourage you all to say hello in comments. Again, we go live every Thursday at 3 o'clock, and today's guest is just an incredible leader within the business community. I know he has a lot of first and second and even third degree connections to our already growing Navigating Now community. More so, he is an advisor to a lot of leaders in and outside of business. He is a mentor to a lot of individuals, including myself. And he is a proven executive, both leading his strategic advisor practice today and having built, run, and scaled organizations in his previous lives as a leader across a handful of different organizations. Pat McCauley is a friend, he's a mentor, and he's just a great member of our community. And Pat, we are so thrilled to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Anthony, and really excited to be here today and just appreciate you give me the chance to join Navigating Now and be part of that great effort you talked about. So really excited to join today.
Thank you. Yeah, just incredible to have you on the show. As you can see here, we have a little bit of a special tag on today's episode. We're calling this a 37-minute edition. That is very special to us. The 37-minute moniker, the 37-minute theme means so much to us here at Thoughttium, the learning and development community at large, and I know Pat as well too. And for a little bit of explanation, 37 minutes represents a mantra, a call to action of one of the most impressionable and long-lasting members of all of our communities at large, the learning and development community, the business community, and the Thoughttium community. Mr. Chuck Pearse, who was just an incredible friend, leader, and mentor to so many of us, including Pat and I, is not only in our thoughts today, but he is here with us in so many ways. Last week marked the one-year anniversary of Chuck's passing, and I know that so many of us, both in and outside of his Astellas network, as well as the broader business community and L&D community, really came together last week in thought, in prayer, and in goodwill to honor the legacy that Chuck has lived. And every time I get on the line with Pat, we always share a Chuck story because we love to tap into just the amazing energy that he brought to our lives. And so I want to really start this episode acknowledging Chuck, the impression that he had on this community. And I want to do that through maybe a couple stories. So Pat, if you could share one of your favorite Chuck Pearse stories and give us a little bit of insight as to what Chuck meant to you as a leader.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to really talk about Chuck today, because if we're going to sit down and talk about leadership in any situation and think about it, we're all influenced by great mentors. And without a doubt, Chuck Pearse is one of the greatest leaders that I've ever been fortunate enough to be a part of. And there's a beautiful picture of him and Chris Abushi and I out golfing, and one of the great memories that we had. But when I think about Chuck, and it's appropriate with that picture, you probably have one of the most optimistic, positive individuals I've ever been associated with. And one of his favorite sayings and one of my favorite Chuck stories is he loved golf, was passionate about golf. And whenever he hit a golf ball, if it was at least pin high, he would turn aside and say, that's pin high, that's a great shot. But he didn't care whether it was 30 yards to the right of the pin, 40 yards to the left of the pin. Chuck and his framework was all about, it was pin high, it's positive, the glass is half full, there's a way to make it happen. So I think his reference to that phrase just really speaks to who he was as a leader. And, all of us have read tons of books about leadership, and there's tons of things that are out there. The thing about Chuck, to me, that stands out, that separates probably good leaders from great leaders, and you referenced it, Anthony, it's the impact that he's had on others. And so the impact that he has had on me, has had on others, but continues to have today is just tremendous. And, my memories of Chuck is whenever you're in front of him, you are the absolute sole attention of him. You never left him feeling worse. You felt inspired. You believed in yourself. You started believing things you might not have been able to. And that's just the leadership impact that Chuck has had on me as an individual, but I know he's had on so many others. And as you said, we just passed the 1-year anniversary. I can't tell you how many people I talked to today that still talk about that impact that Chuck has had in their lives. And just a phenomenal leader that if I could do half the things that he's done and embody those great skills, I think I'd be well on my way. So he's just a super, super influence in my life, even today.
Yeah, I just really appreciate that story. And I'm sure there are so many folks that are tuning in today that can absolutely relate to your sentiment, to the way that you worked with Chuck and the value that he brought to so many people's lives. The title of today's episode is When Leadership Matters Most. And, those of us who knew Chuck were most likely in the trenches with him. And he was often the first person to step in when leadership mattered most, those pivotal moments of organizational change, or even just changes in your life. He would be the one that you would go to because you knew that when it mattered most, he was willing to make the time. He was willing to make you the center of his focus. And you knew that he would call on just a tremendous wealth of his own experience to, as I would always say, give you those gentle nudges in the right direction. And if there's anybody that embodies this concept of leadership when it matters most, it was Chuck, and we still feel that presence today. Chuck gave us a charge towards the last few years that he was with us. And that command, that challenge, that charge for us was to dedicate, part of our practitionership, our love for our work, to learning. He was a leader of learning amongst so many other aspects of business. And he really challenged us to take a couple moments, 37 minutes, in fact, every day, to sharpen our craft, to go deeper with the passions that we love. And so we felt it would be very appropriate today to spend 37 minutes, you and I, Pat, in Chuck's honor. And I couldn't be more happy and proud to be sharing these 37 minutes than with somebody like yourself who knew and loved Chuck just as much as all of us.
Well, thank you. And I feel the same. I feel honored. And again, I know a lot of your listeners here today, a lot of the Navigating Now and colleagues we have just really think the world of Chuck and really are so fortunate today to know that our paths have crossed and he still has that legacy and that impact on us today. So I really mean it when I say it's an honor to be here for this session.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get into the show because I think it's just a really good segue to the changing and the shifting of the leadership landscape today. Pat, I've gotten to know you over the course of the last few years through a couple of different lenses. You have been a mentor to me, so we've had a lot of very specific conversations about career development, about leading teams and leading organizations, and I've gotten so much from your leadership and so much from tapping into your experience. You've also been an advisor to so many, and a lot of us who are probably tuning in today have been the product of your great perspective, calling on your experience and advising on things as specific as business strategy, and maybe things as general as just ensuring that you're making the right decisions for yourself in your career path. Today's about leadership, though, and a lot of the advice that I've gotten from you has been very situational. You're one of those leaders, Pat, that would rather be on the phone talking about a very specific scenario in leadership and providing value there than you would be standing on a stage, talking about theory or talking about trends, if you will. And I think that's what makes you such a great advisor to so many. So today we almost want to take the approach of, Pat is with us advising and coaching the way that he has for me and so many others over the years. And I hope that the community can really tap into some of the situational leadership that you've shown when it really matters most. And so we've got 3 topics today that we'll cover over the course of the next 20 or 30 minutes. We want you to share some of your experience through very specific scenarios that you might have been a part of or been leading through. And as always, our community loves a couple of the nuggets, the takeaways, the things to consider when we as leaders are challenged with a scenario that is very similar to this. And so we're going to bring forward 3 topics that we feel are very prominent today in the business landscape, things that we need to be looking out for as leaders, particularly in today's very dynamic leadership environment. And we're going to share some stories, but we're also going to make sure that there's some very specific takeaways. So I know that you're up for it. I'm not even going to ask because this could be essentially a phone conversation that you and I are having on a random Thursday afternoon. So why don't we dive into it?
Okay, sounds great.
All right. So the first topic that we wanted to bring forward when we talk about leadership, when it matters most, is the concept of courage with leadership. And I know that this is something that has been spoken to and written about, and a lot of people and leaders are really focused on how they can lead more courageously. So, with that as kind of the backdrop, you and I have talked a lot about specific situations where courage is not only a necessity in your leadership style, but it also is a real benefit to those folks who you are managing. And that's one of the things you've taught me, Pat, is that courage is not necessarily always the ability to go against the grain, the ability to have the difficult conversations. Courage, from what I've learned from you, is a challenge for us to maintain trust and consistency and transparency in a way that our folks really benefit from us telling it like it is and giving them a little bit of the transparency and the speed of trust that allows you to move and react and stay agile in ways that maybe we didn't before. So let's talk a little bit. I'm curious as to, what does courage in leadership mean for you? And maybe give us a scenario that, you come across or you've been in where courage matters most.
Well, it's a fantastic topic, I think, when you think about leadership and when it matters the most. Ironically, I was thinking of our title and I was thinking about, when does leadership not matter? The reality is it probably matters every day, but there's certain times that obviously, and one you just described, when courage is needed, that you really need to step up as a leader. And all of this, I think, have been in some of those situations. But for me, courage really starts with, and it's something I've kind of formed over my career. It used to be in my earlier stages of, do I have the courage to step up? Can I? Am I uncomfortable? Can I have that difficult conversation? But I think over time, I've shifted my thinking, and my experience has taught me that it's not about can you or should you. It's your responsibility, as you mentioned, to your people to have courage. Number one, people need that in times, at difficult times and challenging times. But even when it comes down to some of those conversations, if you think about it, that's the obligation we owe our people, is to be direct, to be specific, to do things that really take us out of our comfort zone. And that, to me, is what courage is really all about. It's not just about some of the tough decisions, but it's when you go through these, can you still be courageous and really stick to some of the core values that you even just mentioned as you go through some of those scenarios? So I know when I started out, it was not the easiest thing to do. I think over time, when you get more experience, you realize that sometimes when you have those courageous decisions, conversations within an organization, it kind of gets a little easier and easier because you know it's the right thing to kind of do at your core. So we could talk till the cows come home about all of the different situations about courage. There's one that really comes to my mind when you think about specifics. And, sometimes we learn a lot from other people. And I can think of one great example for me as a leader. This was years ago at a life science company. And we were in a situation where we were going through a very difficult time. It was going to be a reorganization. And this organization had not done that. This was not something that was normal. This was not something that was part of a regular basis. And so there was a lot of swirl. You can imagine everybody was talking about the rumors, what's going to happen. I know I talked to so-and-so. There was just this tremendous swirl about what was going to go on. And so the leader at that time made a few decisions through that process that I think to me really demonstrated courage, but the impact that this individual had on the entire group was amazing. The first thing the leader did in this situation is said, I want to fly everybody from across the country into a room. I want to address every single leader that we're going through this, and I want to see them and talk to them, and we want them to hear from me. And, that's a lot different than some of the companies I know that we've been at that might handle reorganizations or situations through calls and emails. I thought that was a pretty courageous decision by this individual to call everybody together. And the reason that the individual wanted to do that is they wanted to look into the eyes of people, have a real conversation, talk from the heart about exactly what was and what wasn't. And so one of the first things I saw when we gathered everybody together, and again, the room swirling, what's going on, what's going to happen to me, this individual had a great context and a great understanding for what people were going through. And you hear that a lot about the awareness. Can you read the room? Do you understand what's on the minds of people? Can you identify with that? And I think the way that the leader described a lot of feelings that were going on and why we were here together, and he had no notes, no transcript, no anything, no slides, just looking eye to eye at people. He just established tremendous credibility in that example. But the next couple of things he did that really also stood out to me is, courage talks about admitting that you don't know everything. Here's what we know right now from a communication about this reorganization. Here's what we don't know. Here's what I know is not true. But as things continue to go, we're going to continue to communicate with you. So I think it was just that transparent communication, not being afraid to say, I don't have all the answers, but trusting to bring people into that. And then the final thing that I think really stood out to me is here's the room thinking, okay, we've heard everything. We feel a lot more comfortable. We understand the direction we're going. But this leader flipped it and said, now let me tell you what I expect of you. I need you and I expect you in your roles to go out and lead this organization through what we're about to go through. You got my commitment to do these things, but I need your commitment. So it was almost like a dual commitment to each other where if you were in that room, you really felt the great sense of, look, I'm ready to step up. I know he's got our vested interest and let's go make this happen. So to me, the courage and the way that was done from a few hours when people walked into the room to the way that it had changed at the end, I think was a great example to me about when you put yourself out there and you're authentic and you're open. It's just a great example of that courage, and the impact it had on us was tremendous.
Yeah, I love that example because it's so representative of a lot of different situations that we've been in, whether it's leaders or the recipients of leadership. And there's a real opposing side to that as well, too. If that leader were to not show such a sense of courage, his team and his audience may not have had the clarity, may not have had the understanding of what was truly expected of them. And they also might not really know what's going on with the organization and could leave under a cloud of hearsay and continued swirl as they came into the meeting. And, one of the things that you've taught us as leaders is that your people are owed a certain sense of that transparency and that authenticity. And again, it's not necessarily always going against the grain. It's having the courage to be real and to be direct and to be straightforward and to explain what is needed of your people in a very direct way. And there's so many coaching points that I've received from you that are directly preceded by, and so needs that information. I would want to give that person that information because that allows them to establish a certain sense of confidence and trust in the direction that they're headed. And so that situation, I just think is so universal. And I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. Courage in leadership is just one of those absolute timeless skills.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on. So topic 2, if we start with courage, you and I put our heads together. We said, what's maybe at the center of the need to have this courage? And I mean, it's so relevant today. The ability to lead through change is yet another foundational or required skill of today's leader. And if we didn't know that 2 or 3 years ago, we absolutely were reminded of that very quickly at the doorstep of the pandemic in April of 2020. And all of us as leaders were almost dealt with this universal shift that was happening in the global marketplace. And we immediately had to take that change and translate it to what it meant for our organization, and most importantly, what it meant for our people down to the individual level. And we had to do that within a mere couple days. So let's talk about leading through adversity and change. And Pat, maybe what are some of the things that you've learned through your work or through your leadership over the last couple of years that make leading through adversity so important in today's leadership?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I've learned probably over time, and I really try to focus on more now, is whenever you're going through adversity and change, you think about leadership, and when things are going as they should, regular business cycles, regular planning, things are working, performance is going well, you're just kind of working on cruise control. But when you get into adversity, which is going to happen, when you get into change, which is going to happen, you can never control that of when it's coming, but obviously you control how you look at it and what your perspective is. So one of the things that I've tried to work more on, and I really didn't do this well, I think, starting out my career, but is to really embrace the change and to embrace the adversity. Because I think if you're able to have a mindset of, we know it's coming, and when it comes, we don't have to like it. We may have to struggle through it. We still might feel fear, but we know that we can look at it from a different lens. And I think the more that adversity comes and you start to look at, well, let's look at this. What are the solutions we can do? What are things that we can do that are a little different? How can we be innovative, creative, et cetera? Good things can come out of adversity and change. And I think sometimes fear gets the best of us. And I know it did me early on is, oh my gosh, we have a big change. We have to do things differently. How is our team going to respond to this, et cetera? So I think embracing that as a leader is really, really important, because it allows you then to do and be more productive for your people. So those are one of the things that I've always been comfortable with. The other thing about adversity and change, it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I will continue to work on it with the great people we have, the great team we have. We'll continue to find ways to be successful. So I think a lot of times you can see where leaders try to say, I have all the answers for the change, et cetera. Just be comfortable saying, I don't know, but we're going to continue to work through it and learn. It's really a learning journey as you go through that. For me, there's been so many situations I know a lot of people have gone through. I can tell you one time I was really, really tested. And this was years ago at a startup company. I had a great opportunity, like many people talk about, to go work at a startup company and really build something from the ground floor, something we always love to do, and it sounds exciting. And it was a great opportunity to join a team and help commercialize an organization that was overseas. And it was their first time to really come from a commercial perspective to the US. And what we had was an opportunity to really put a sales team in place, put some sales leader in place. It was the first product that we were going to launch. And so we kind of made a decision, which was a little risky, but we were going to build that infrastructure before the product was to launch. So we had everybody, people had come to the organization. We built the leadership team. We were hiring representatives. People were coming as part of the vision. We didn't have a lot to offer. We didn't have the big pensions and history of other organizations, but people believed in the leadership team and the vision of where we were going. Everything was going great, but then here came that adversity that you talked about, and that the FDA on the PDUFA date said that they wanted additional data and they wanted to delay the approval. So you can imagine the screeching halt, and this was never in the plans. We never We thought this could happen, but we had all indications that it was going to go well. And, as a leader, it wasn't even so much about the business as these people had believed in you and your leadership team to come join. And so in that adversity, you can think about fear and you can think about what do we do? And most companies would potentially, if it's a financial decision, lay people off, come back when we have more data, if we're approved a year from then. But the team, I give great credit to the leadership team. I give great credit to the organization, made a decision and said, let's look at this a little differently. What can we do? What's the creativity? What can we do? We understand that we have a year delay, but how can we use this potentially to our advantage? And there were just a few things that we came up with collectively about investing in our people, not just from a skill set and competency, but literally their personal visions, their personal missions. We invested in them on a regular basis. We also said, what can we do with the community, the healthcare professionals? Well, we could certainly talk about disease state. We could talk about the pipeline of the company. We had to absolutely respect the FDA, and we couldn't talk about anything in promotion. But if you spend a year with your individuals investing in them, and you spend time potentially with your clinical science liaisons educating disease state, you really started to build up a lot of momentum as you went into that launch. And one of the things that I remember is that when we had to sell this to senior leadership, the team really came up with, look, we're not launching a product, we're launching a company. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. And if we did make what could be the financially easier decision to lay people off or furlough them until launch, you're never going to get that reputation back. You might not get a lot of those people back. So for me, when I think about leading through adversity and change, and believe me, it was not me, it was the great team that I was working with, finding those ways to reposition versus we can either do A or B, find a way to do it. And, when you move forward, I know a lot of the equity built up in our individual people, as well as our customers and community, I think paid tremendous dividends. And I think it was not an easy decision to make. And I think the support of senior leadership obviously was a significant part. But that to me is when I think about leading through adversity and change, no one had prepared us for that before. No one had been through that before. But if you lean on the people that you have, great things can happen.
Yeah. And I'll it's such a great example. I'll double down on leaning on your people. If there was anybody who was more equipped and one of the best at leading through change, it was our friend Chuck Pearson. And you would almost just gravitate towards him when there was a shift within the team or the organization. And you could tell that he was relying on what he had the most confidence on was the vision that he had put forward for his team, his own team. He would immediately turn inward and get his team involved in navigating the change. And those were two things that he just relied on most at the center of change. And which is why, a lot of our eyes went towards him when, there were some unknowns or when there was maybe a wrench thrown in the plan. And, he is and was one that just really knew how to lead with authority through change. And I appreciate you sharing your example as well too, Pat. We'll move on to our third topic here. And this is one that is near and dear to my heart as, the head of an organization that's growing and making hiring decisions on a day-to-day basis. When leadership matters most, as you start to think about building and hiring and scaling a team, whether that's within an organization or as part of a startup, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of theory around how to build a high-performing team. And Pat, I'm curious, in the next couple of minutes, what are some of the nuggets that you might propose for somebody who's building a team, hiring, or potentially starting from the ground up? And maybe a situation that you've been in, because I know you've been a part of startups and large organizations where your leadership has mattered in this area.
Yeah, I'll start with one of the things, and just a little story with that I've learned over time. And I know, Anthony, you and I've chatted about this, is when you're building that team, never, ever rush the hiring decision. And one of my favorite stories is we were building a team and an individual, we had a couple of openings, and one of them took months and months to fill. And I was working with this manager saying, where are we on the candidates? People are coming in. It was a sales rep position. Classes are going. Where's the sense of urgency? And the manager told me, I haven't found the right person. And here I am being impatient about let's go, let's go, let's go. Time is everything. And long story short, this individual was hired probably 4 to 6 months later, and probably won every single award that we had in the first year and a half that individual was on board. And to this day, I love it that manager reminds me about, waiting to hire the right person. And I think you're absolutely right. But what a great lesson. Think of your greatest people that you have. And if I told you had to hire them 3 or 6 months later than they joined, you'd say, I don't care. I'll take that person all day long. So in building that team, make sure that you're not settling. Most people we interview can probably do the job, but do they really come in and elevate your team to a level that's not there? So I think that's one thing. The other thing that I've tried to practice is absolutely, for me, hire what you can't teach and hire for potential. Just because you have performance in an area doesn't mean you're the best candidate. I always look for the potential. And when I say hire what you can't teach, people can learn different skills, different sets, different crafts. We have transferable skill sets. The things that you can't necessarily teach or are harder are the intrinsic values. I mean, when you think about it, it's the drive, it's the initiative, it's the people that just want to excel. Those are the things that you really, I think, try to uncover in an interview process. And if you can start to really align those, I don't feel I've rarely gone wrong. If you really have somebody that just thrives in those intangibles, can learn, is hungry, they tend to excel in their current roles, but in other roles that they do as well. So those might be a couple of things that I continue to think of today.
I love both of those because they're maybe a little outside of some of the obvious principles in hiring and scaling a team. Your ability to have patience in the process and ensure that you've got the right fit. And as well, your ability to hire, and I love that, hire for skills that you can't teach. Hire, especially in the startup space for us, it's so important to find folks that, yes, can fulfill the requisite and the job requirements, but that bring a certain margin. We were just talking about this earlier today about a candidate that we're hiring that just so happens to have what we called a 20% margin of skill outside of the JD. And for a second, we kind of stopped and said, is this the right candidate? Because, he or she has this skill set that lives outside of the job description. And we had to catch ourselves a little bit and say, that's not a bad thing, right? You don't hire for a specific JD. You hire for the potential that they have, particularly in a startup, to have impact both in and outside of the job description. So I just really appreciate that. I'll throw one other thing in there, and maybe you can riff off of this for just a quick minute, Pat, because you have given myself and I know a couple leaders here at Thought Team, and as well, I'm sure other leaders out there, really good tips on interview questions. And I want to put one out there that you gave me, maybe it was 30 minutes before I was about to go into a pretty high stakes interview with a final round candidate. And I will never forget this question because it stopped me in my tracks. It was for a role that was to come in and lead a group of folks and have significant top line revenue responsibilities to grow and expand our business. And at the end of our conversation, Pat, you said, I think you should ask this candidate the simple question of, who are you bringing with you? And I paused, and it was like you just stopped me in my tracks because it was a question that I would have never thought to be that specific and that clear, but it made so much sense that you want to bring people in that are going to bring like-minded people with them. And that doesn't necessarily mean bringing other full-time employees in. It could mean expanding the network, the community, and the sphere of influence. And I'll never forget that interview question. Maybe in the last minute, do you have another one that you love to ask when you're interviewing for leadership positions?
Yeah, I really love that question too, because it goes to the heart of followership, right? Are people going to follow you? Do they believe in you? It's a lot more than that. There's so many good questions, I think, that are out there, a couple that maybe bubble up. I prefer to ask questions that are kind of multi-layered. I think for me, I can learn more about digging into the insights. So some of mine are really like time balanced. So if you look a year ahead from today, you and I are sitting here to the candidate. What does great look like for you? Did you define your great year that you just had? You can potentially align on, do they even understand what the expectations of the position are? Flip it around, whatever they're doing in their positions. If you say over the last year, you've been in this position or what have you, what are some of the toughest decisions you had to make, biggest failures that you had. If you could unwind the clock and do it differently, what would you do and tell me why? And I think it's kind of peeling it back, Anthony, when you just say, tell me the why, tell me what you learned. And then I think one of the biggest questions I get is, what is your biggest failure? Tell me what you've learned from that, and tell me how you're a different person or leader because of that today. Because to me, that goes to the heart of, are they coachable? Are they open to feedback? And are they at least humble enough to say, I've got a lot of things to work on? Because if you get red flags around those things about, I'm not sure I can tell you about my challenges or what I've learned, I've just learned later on, that can be difficult when you have conversations about potentially performance or things like that. So love to dig deep to learn about the coachability and openness for people to improve. So those are a couple things that I've done.
I love that. I love those nuggets, and I'm sure it helps a lot of folks who are in the recruiting process or the hiring process. A couple of good questions can absolutely change the trajectory of those high stakes conversations. And we just appreciate your anecdotes, Pat. I think it's so fitting that we spend the last minute of these 37 minutes together getting back to what Chuck loved to talk about most. And that is, our responsibility to learn as leaders. And so in this 37th minute of the episode, I know Chuck is listening, and he's with us in so many ways. He would love to know, Pat, what are you committed to learning about this year?
I think a few things, and I know Chuck would be absolutely, if he was in front of me, in my face, talking about, what are you going to do? What are you going to commit to? All of his hands moving. A couple things to me, and they're probably a little COVID related and what we're here in front of us. But, when I start to talk to a lot of people, and I spend a lot of time, you and I've chatted about this, one of the things I'm committed to is there is in my sense, a massive need for human connection. And I say that because we're not so much in the workplace, obviously with remote offices, with maybe people going back part-time, I just sense there's this need to connect. So one of the things that I'm working on is really thinking about, from your network and people you've talked to or haven't talked to in a while, proactively reaching out, just trying to see how people are doing, reaching out for no reason. So that's one thing that I really, really want to work on. Probably a little bit more when I think about some of the skill sets or competencies. One of the things, and I think I learned this growing up in a large family of 9, I want to make sure I'm always listening really to learn and understand somebody's perspective versus just listening to talk. And I know we're so busy right now, but if you're in meetings and see things, a lot of people are just listening and ready to speak. But when you take the minute to sit back and listen to someone and give them their, just like Chuck would do, just a genuine interest and hear what they have to say and try to learn it, I think that's something I'm always trying to do, because I think that's really important right now. And then the last thing is, I've always challenged myself when in the midst of change and all we're going through, try to find, kind of, we talked about it earlier, try to find and think differently than you have. What's creative? So many great things come out of COVID, crisis, change. What are they? They're probably right in front of you. You just got to look and find it and think differently than you have before. So those are probably some of the areas that I'm trying to challenge myself to grow as much as I can.
I love that. And thank you for such a thoughtful response. One of the things that you said, I think supports a lot of what I'm focused on in terms of my learning practitionership. You talked about the power of listening and being present for those around you. One of the things that Chuck, told me over and over and over, and I'll never forget it, is that people deserve to be heard. And I think that was behind a lot of just the deep intent that he had in his career to focus in, to close the door, to shut the technology off, and to be in real connection with whoever he was with. And I miss that dearly. I know you do as well, but it's a skill that I am focused on learning and continuing to develop in my own sense of leadership. And a lot of that has to do with just acknowledging the fact that I could spend the rest of my career pouring into those who are immediately around me today. Our wonderful community, our great, small but mighty set of clients who we support on a day-to-day basis. And most importantly, those folks that I consider to be more than, clients, friends, et cetera. And Pat, I'd consider you to be so much more than just a community member here. You are a friend, you're a mentor, and you're somebody that I really look up to. And yes, for your leadership, but also for the way that you navigate your life on a day-to-day basis. And I've been so thrilled to be a part of your life over the last couple of years, and so excited about our path forward. You being a part of the community and a big part of Thought Team's growth. I know so many folks who are tuning in today just really appreciate your leadership, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. I can guarantee you, leadership's about people. I've been so blessed to have so many great people cross paths along the way. We talked about Chuck, but as well as with you and Thoughtium, so that's wonderful. And I also say thank you for the navigating now. We're talking about ways to come in to the community to share and grow and experience. So I know what episode in the 70s now, but people from all different backgrounds are coming together, and you learn so much just by listening. So thank you, and thank Thoughtium for taking the time to set up this space, as you guys define so well, for that learning, sharing, and growing together. And it was an honor to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. So much appreciated. And this will not be the last time, I can guarantee that. Well, that was a phenomenal 37 minutes. I hope we have so many more like this. Pat, thank you for kicking off this 37-minute series. What a wonderful way to honor the life and the legacy of Chuck, and also what a wonderful way to connect. This adds to just our growing library of amazing discussions and dialogue just like this. It also adds to our passion for creating communities of leaders and folks just like Pat. And we are dedicated to bringing this perspective to you every week, Thursday afternoon. As I mentioned before, you can learn more about Navigating Now. You can watch all of our previous episodes at thoughtteam.com/live. And next week, we continue to bring great leaders to the table with Chris Pieta, the founder of Pieta Productions. He's running a production agency here in Chicago. And over the last year, he's done just an incredible job bringing a perspective forward on how to start a creative business. And he does it the way we love to do it, which is sharing the process, the ups, the downs, the trials and tribulations that he's going through in building a business. So for all of you entrepreneurs out there, both in the creative realm and not, Chris is just a wealth of information, and we're excited to have him at the table. So Pat, thank you so much again for joining. To all of you who are joining on all the socials, particularly LinkedIn, we're so thrilled to have you here with us, and we'll see you again next Thursday.